Hello everyone, I'm Z from Susan's family. Today, I'm sharing with you the Fu series bamboo shadow cardigan. For this electronic tutorial, you can search for en.sussudiy.com on the website to view it. This cardigan comes in two sizes. The knitting method is the same for different sizes. Only the number of stitches and rows differ. The cardigan includes the back piece, the left and right front pieces, the sleeves, the bordure, the collar and buttons. First, knit and sew the back piece, front pieces, and sleeves. Then, add the bordure along the front bands and hem. Next, pick up stitches for the collar at the neckline. Finally, make the buttons. It should be noted that, since everyone's hand tension varies, the size of the knitted piece will also differ. Before starting the actual knitting, you can knit a gauge sample. Measure your hand tension. The method for knitting the gauge sample is explained in a separate video. After measuring, follow the instructions in the video to adjust your tension before knitting. Now, let's start learning the back piece. The video uses the small size chart for demonstration. The back piece is started by cable cast on. It's worked in stocking stitch from bottom to top. To make the explanation easier, we divide the back piece into section 1 and section 2. In section 1, decreases are needed on both sides. In section 2, start with decreases at the underarm on both sides. Then, work even. In the final few rows, you need to shape the neckline in the middle. Knit the shoulders with a slope on both sides. The chart omits some rows and stitches here. In section 1, you start by cable cast on. Before you cast on, leave a long yarn tail at the beginning for sewing. The tail length is usually 3 times the length needed for sewing. However, the tail is too long to sewing. Therefore, it's recommended to leave about 1 meter. If it's not enough later, you can join more yarn for sewing. You can make a bobbin with the reserved long yarn tail. Then, cast on. This won't affect the knitting. Please see the specific casting on method. First, take the corresponding yarn. Make a loose knot with the yarn. Under normal circumstances, start by leaving about 10 centimeters. This makes it convenient to weave in the ends later. Hold a double-pointed needle in your left hand, or hold one end of a circular needle. Insert it into the loop. Gently tighten it. This is the first stitch. Hold another double-pointed needle in your right hand as a pen, or hold the other end of the circular needle. Wrap the yarn around your right little finger. Let your ring finger and middle finger lightly press the yarn. Place this yarn between your index finger and middle finger. This is the basic knitting posture. After the first stitch is cast on, place the right hand needle above the yarn. Insert the right hand needle from front to back into the loops on the left hand needle. Bring the yarn over with your right index finger. Yarn over and pull the yarn through. Place it on the left needle. Don't pull the yarn too tight. Otherwise, it will be difficult to work in later. This is the second stitch. Continue casting on. Place the right hand needle above the yarn. Insert from front to back into the space between these two stitches. Yarn over. Pull through. Place it on the left-hand needle. This is the third stitch. Note: don't pull the yarn too tight. Continue casting on. Insert between the loops. Yarn over and pull through. This is the fourth stitch. Each insertion is between 2 loops. Continue to cast on. Until you have the required number of stitches. This is the method for cable cast on. The number of stitches for the sample is smaller. The focus is on explaining the method. After completing the cast on, the first row follows the arrow direction in the chart, which means from right to left. This indicates knitting on the right side. Blank squares indicate knit on right side, or purl on wrong side. So, the first row is all knit stitches. Now, the first row of the sample is complete. Continue with the second row. We will work this row on the wrong side. You need to work the certain symbols on the wrong side, which means all purl stitches. Now, the second row of the sample is complete. Next in section 1. Knit every rows on the right side. And purl on the wrong side. There are all the braid texture on the right side. We call this stocking stitch. The stocking stitch piece tends to curl a bit. This is normal. You can iron it later. When counting rows, start counting from the second braid upwards. There are 3 braids here. 1 braid equals 1 row. The loops on the needle also count as 1 row, so the sample here has 4 rows. The bottom braid is formed by the cast on. For the section 1, you need to decrease at the beginning and end of the rows. On this side, it's a slip knit pass over. And for the other side, knit 2 stitches together. We'll refer to these as KO and K2 tog. We call the rows with decreases as decrease rows. Now, I will demonstrate these 2 types of decreases. First, knit 1 stitch. Then knit a KO. This means slip 1 stitch knitwise. Then knit 1 stitch. Next, pass slipped stitch over. The KO is completed. In the middle, knit even. Continue knitting until you have 3 loops left. Finally, When you have 3 loops left, knit a K2 tog. This means inserting the needle from left to right into 2 loops at once. Then knit 1 stitch together. The K2 tog is completed. Finally, knit 1 stitch. Next, when you encounter these 2 types of decreases, refer to the demonstration here. Everyone continue to follow the chart and complete section 1. You can place a marker for each decrease row. When you don't have stitch markers, you can use safety pins or paper clips instead. With that, we've covered section 1. After completing section 1, continue to section 2. For the beginning rows in section 2, you need to decrease at both sides for the underarm. Then, work even. For the ending rows, use short rows to create the shoulder part sloping. Perform neckline decreases in the middle. First, learn how to do underarm decreases, short rows, and neckline decreases. After learning these, refer to the chart to knit. With that, we've finished the back piece. I will use this sample to explain the method. At the beginning of row 1, you need to bind off a few stitches. The specific stitch count is indicated in the chart. The number of symbols indicates how many stitches to bind off. Here, I need to bind off 4 stitches in a row. If you need to bind off a large number of stitches, you can use stitch markers to separate them. Start binding off. The first stitch can be slipped or knitted. Here, I'll do a slip stitch. Then knit 1 stitch. Then pass the first stitch over the second one. This completes the bind off for 1 stitch. Unless otherwise specified, binding off uses the basic knit bind off on the right side. Continue by knitting 1 stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. Continue basic knit bind off. Keep knitting and binding off until only 1 loop remains to the right of the marker. I have 2 loops remaining. I need to bind off 1 more stitch. Now, there is only 1 loop remaining to the right of the marker. This is the 4th stitch loop. We need to bind off this stitch as well. Therefore, we need to knit 1 more stitch and bind off. The following stitch is the adjacent stitch of the last bind off symbol. We will knit here. Note: since the stitch may vary for different patterns, this stitch needs to be knitted according to the chart. After knitting, bind off the 4th stitch as well. This way, the 4 stitches on the chart are bound off. Continue knitting according to the chart. Note: you should start knitting from the 2nd stitch next to the bind off symbol. Before you start knitting, gently tighten this loop to prevent any obvious holes. There's no special pattern here. So we'll knit all stitches. Knit this row. Now, the first row is done. Continue with the second row. This row is worked on the wrong side. At the beginning, bind off 4 stitches. First, use a stitch marker to separate. Start binding off. The first stitch can be a slip stitch, or you can purl it. Here, I'll do a slip stitch. Then purl 1 stitch. Next, pass the first stitch over the second stitch. This binds off 1 stitch. Continue with 1 more purl stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. When there are no special instructions, on the wrong side, make basic purl bind off. Continue binding off while purling. Keep going until there is only 1 stitch left to the right of the marker. Here, we bind off 1 more stitch. Now there is only 1 stitch left to the right of the marker. This is the 4th stitch. Bind off this stitch as well. So, work 1 more stitch and bind off the next stitch, which is also the stitch adjacent to the last bind off symbol. On the wrong side, we will purl this stitch. Bind off the 4th stitch. In actual knitting, the specific stitch technique for this stitch should follow the chart. This way, the 4 stitches on the chart are bound off. Continue following the chart. Note: the next stitch should start from the second stitch, next to this bind off symbol. Before knitting, slightly tighten this loop. To prevent any obvious holes. There is no special pattern here, so we will purl all stitches. Now, the second row is explained. Next, bind off on the right side. The method is the same as the first row. Bind off on the wrong side. The method is the same as the second row. I will demonstrate 2 more rows. Continue with the third row. You need to bind off 2 stitches at the beginning of this row. First, bind off 1 stitch. On the right side, work basic knit bind off. Then knit 1 stitch and bind off. Note: when binding off the last stitch, the stitch you are working on should be done according to the chart. Sometimes the pattern is special, so it may not be a knit stitch here. Don't get it wrong. The wrong side is the same. Now I have bound off 2 stitches. Continue to complete this row. Once completed, continue with the 4th row. At the beginning of this row, bind off 2 stitches. First, bind off 1 stitch. Work basic purl bind off. Then work another purl stitch and bind off. This way, you have bound off 2 stitches. Continue to complete this row. Now I have finished the 4th row. If you only need to bind off 1 stitch on each side, the method is the same as the first stitch you bound off. This is the method for underarm decreases. Then, learn how to do short rows. For example, on the first row, I will short row with 5 stitches on this side. I knit normally until there are 5 stitches left, then I stop. I have now completed the first row. Turn the work. Continue with the second row. At the beginning of the second row, work a double stitch. No matter what the next stitch is. Place the yarn above the right-hand needle. Slip the first stitch. Then pull tight. If the next stitch is a purl stitch, bring the yarn to the front before working it. If the next stitch is a knit stitch, work it directly. I am working purl stitches on the wrong side. You can see that. In the second row, there is short row with 5 stitches on this side, which means you work to the end leaving 5 stitches unworked. After completing this, turn your work. Continue with row 3, starting with a double stitch, which means slip the stitch purlwise. Then pull tight. If the next stitch is a purl stitch, bring the yarn to the front and work the stitch. If the next stitch is a knit stitch, just work it as usual. Here, I am knitting a stitch. Sometimes the number of stitches in each short row is the same. Sometimes it may vary due to the pattern or other reasons. The number of short rows can be different. You need to follow the chart instructions specifically. You can see that at the end of row 3, you need to work short rows for 3 stitches. Note: the double stitch counts as 1 stitch. That means you don't work these 3 stitches. Now, row 3 is complete. Row 4 also ends with working short rows for 3 stitches. Similarly, the double stitch is counted as 1 stitch. After each short row, the first stitch should be a double stitch. Now, row 4 is complete. Sometimes, while working short rows, you also need to shape the neckline in the middle. You can refer to the chart to work on this. I will continue to finish the rows that require short rows in this chart. Now, I have finished. After completing the short rows, which match up to the third row from the end of the chart. Next, you need to knit double stitch for the 9th row. I'll start by knitting double stitch on this side. I'll knit every stitch here. When you encounter the double stitch, knit the 2 legs together. This side is now finished. For the last row, you need to purling double stitch on the other side, so I'll purl every stitch on the wrong side here. When you encounter a double stitch, purl the 2 legs together. This is the technique for short rows. Let's learn a commonly used neckline decrease method, which is basic bind off, thus creating the necessary curve. Suppose this is the neckline of the front piece. Therefore, this side is the left shoulder, and this side is the right shoulder. Sometimes, the shoulders require short rows. There are no short rows here, we will only explain the neckline decrease. We'll start with the left shoulder. The stitches in this chart is smaller, mainly to explain the method. First, knit the first row of the neckline. Here, we start by knitting 13 stitches. If the stitches are larger, you can use stitch markers to separate these stitches before knitting. I have already knitted the first row. The remaining loops are held. Next, we knit the second row. The second row is worked on the wrong side. You can see that, at the beginning of this row, you need to bind off 3 stitches. If there are many stitches to bind off, we can use stitch markers to separate them first. start binding off. You can slip one stitch first. Then purl one stitch. Followed by passing the first stitch over the second stitch. This bind off one stitch. Continue by one purl stitch. Then bind off another stitch. When there are no special instructions, on the wrong side, you'll work basic purl bind off. There is one stitch left to the right of the marker, which is the third stitch. We need to bind off this stitch. Therefore, you need to work one more stitch and then bind off. The following stitch is the one adjacent to the last bind off symbol. Here, we simply purl. Note, since the stitch techniques may vary with different patterns, you should follow the chart for this stitch. After finishing, bind off the third stitch. This way, the 3 stitches on the chart are bound off. Continue following the chart. Note, you should start from the second stitch next to the bind off symbol. Before you start working, gently tighten this loop to prevent any obvious holes. There are no special patterns here, so we will purl all stitches. Now, the second row is done. Next, knit the third row. Referring to the chart, knit all stitches. I have finished. Continue with the fourth row. Here, just bind off 2 stitches at the beginning. The method is the same as the first row. First, slip 1 stitch. Then purl 1 stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. Continue with 1 purl stitch. Bind off one stitch. And gently tighten the loops. Then, purl all stitches, and finish the 5th row. Now, I have completed the 5th row. Continue with the 6th row. At the beginning of this row, just bind off 1 stitch. The method is the same as bind off the first stitch on the first row. After that, purl all stitches. The remaining 7th and 9th rows. All are knit stitches. The 8th row is the same as the 6th row. Bind off 1 stitch at the beginning. The 10th row does not require any decreases, just purl normally. Now, I have completed these 10 rows. In the end, there should be 6 stitches left. Here it indicates to hold stitches. That means you need to temporarily secure these loops. We can use a waste yarn to temporarily secure them. If there are no special requirements for the yarn tails, leaving about 15 centimeters and then cut the yarn. Pay attention to prevent the loops from slipping off. The left shoulder is now complete. Next, we will work on the right shoulder. Before starting, we need to bind off 9 stitches in the middle. You can use a stitch marker to separate them. Take up the new yarn. Make a slip knot with the yarn. Slightly tighten the loops. Knit 2 stitches first. Then bind off 1 stitch. Knit 1 more stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. When there are no special instructions, on the right side, work basic knit bind off. Continue to bind off the remaining stitches. Also, pay attention when binding off the last loop. The stitch you knit is the first stitch to the left of the bind off symbol. Refer to the chart for the correct stitch. Here we continue to knit and bind off. After completing this, start from the second stitch and finish this row. Then, on the wrong side, purl all stitches for the second row. I have now completed the second row. Continue with the third row. Start by binding off 3 stitches. You can first slip 1 stitch and knit 1 stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. Continue knitting and binding off. Now, the 3 stitches are bound off. Continue to finish the 3rd row, and complete the 4th row. I have now completed the 4th row. The 5th row starts with binding off 2 stitches. The method for binding off these 2 stitches is the same as the first 2 stitches in the 3rd row. For the 7th and 9th rows, start by binding off 1 stitch. The method for binding off this stitch is the same as the first stitch in the 3rd row. I will continue to finish the remaining part of the right shoulder. Now, I have finished the right shoulder. There should be 6 stitches left here, and temporarily secure these 6 stitches. This way, the method for decreasing stitches at the neckline is now explained. Continue learning about the right front piece for this side. We also divide it into section 1 and section 2. Section 1 involves alternate cable cast on. Then knit stocking stitch upwards. Note: the first row starts on the wrong side. This side requires decreasing stitches on the corresponding rows. In section 2, you need to underarm decreases. Knit even above it. End with a few rows of sloping shoulder. For the front band side, work short rows. After completing the short rows, increase stitches on the corresponding rows for the remaining part. After finishing the front band, the top part is done by shaping the neckline with basic bind off. The method is the same as the underarm decreases. Refer to the chart for specifics. Additionally, switch colors on the right front piece to work the bamboo shadow pattern on the top. After finishing everything, join and bind off with the back piece at the right shoulder. Then, sew together the sides of the front and back pieces in section 1. Now, please watch my demonstration. Start casting on. Here, we will work alternate cable cast on. Note: the casting on should be slightly loose, otherwise, the edge will not have any stretch. It will tend to curl up. Now, the sample is cast on. The number of stitches is also fewer. Begin working row 1. We will work this row on the wrong side. Therefore, work the corresponding number of purl stitches. Before you start, you can use a stitch marker to mark the number of stitches for the first row, then work accordingly. For the sample, work 10 stitches for the first row. Purl stitches one by one. The first row is completed. Leave the remaining loops unworked for now. Turn to the right side. Continue with row 2. Start with a double stitch. Work the double stitch in the same way as the back piece's shoulder short row. Then work the knit stitches normally. Complete row 2. After completing it, continue with row 3. First, work purl stitches one by one. Work until you reach the position of the double stitch. Treat the two legs as one stitch. After completing it, you need to work 5 nork stitches. This way, row 3 is completed. For the subsequent rows up to row 15, when working on the wrong side, after working until the position of the double stitch, you need to work a few extra stitches. The specific number of extra stitches can be found by referring to the chart. When working on the right side, the first stitch is always worked a double stitch. Everyone should complete the first 15 rows. Row 15 should perfectly finish all the cast-on stitches. After completing the first 15 rows, continue upwards. The number of rows for this section needs to include increases. Here, it is a right lifted increase. Please watch me demonstrate the method for a right lifted increase. First, knit 1 stitch. Then, work a right lifted increase. Find the braid below the loop. Pick up the right strand. Knit 1 stitch. This is the added stitch. Then, knit this loop. The right lifted increase is completed. Next, everyone refer to the chart and knit. Keep knitting until you finish the rows before the bamboo shadow pattern. After finishing the rows underneath the pattern, starting from this row, you need to knit the bamboo shadow pattern by switching colors. At the pattern position, the main color yarn is always carried in a horizontally line. The contrasting color yarn can be wound into a few small bobbin, and it is carried vertically overall. This means you will be doing intarsia knitting. For shorter distances, you can use the same contrasting color yarn, which means using the same small skein. For longer distances, you need to use different small bobbin. Before knitting, you can wind 3 small bobbins of contrasting color yarn. Use the butterfly method to wind the small bobbin. I'll show you the butterfly method. For winding the small bobbin, there are 2 situations. One situation is taking the yarn from a separate skein and winding it. The other situation is when the yarn is connected to the fabric piece. Regardless of which, the winding method is the same. First, leave a yarn tail of about 10 centimeters, or slightly longer. This yarn tail is the one you will pull out later. Place it like this at the base of your left hand. Hold it with your thumb. And then wind it in a figure-8 pattern on your hand. If the yarn is connected to the fabric piece while making a small bobbin, wind it like this. Note that this end is connected to the fabric piece, making it convenient to pull the yarn. Wind it with moderate tension. The more stitches in a color block, the more you wind the bobbin. The fewer stitches in a color block, you can wind the bobbin less. If there isn't enough yarn later, just join new yarn and continue working. Once you have roughly the size you need, leave a tail and cut the yarn. Then tie a knot like this. You can first wrap a few times in the middle to secure it. If the yarn is smooth, you can tie a few more knots. If the tail here is too long, you can trim it slightly. This is the method for winding a small bobbin. When using it, just pull the yarn gently like this. The benefit of winding a small bobbin is that while working, the yarn is relatively secured. The bobbin won't slide off. When there are multiple bobbin, they are less likely to get tangled. It's convenient for working. If the small bobbin is used until the end, and it gets a bit loose, you can take it apart and wind it again. Or if you make a mistake during working and undo a lot of stitches, you can also wind the undone section into a separate small bobbin. This end is still connected to the workpiece. After winding it, secure it with the yarn. That's it. Next, Everyone can prepare the small bobbin needed for starting the project, according to their needs. After preparing the small bobbin, start the intarsia knitting. If you are not familiar with the intarsia knitting method, you can refer to the following video. Learn how to join yarn, carry yarn and other techniques. Once you've learned them, carefully follow the chart to knit. First, use the original main color yarn, and work normally, until the stitch before the intarsia section. I have fewer stitches here, so I'm just explaining the method. The stitch count and colors are not for reference. After you've finished, let me explain how to join yarn, whether on the right side or the wrong side. The method for joining the yarn is the same. Here, I am joining the yarn on the wrong side. Take the new yarn and make a knot with the original yarn. Pull it to the base. This completes the joining. If you are joining the yarn on the right side, it's also the first stitch before changing colors. Then tie the new yarn with the original yarn and pull it to the base. We will use the intarsia method here. I will work 2 stitches with this yarn. The yarn tail can be woven in later. Here, the stitch count is less than 3. Bring the main color yarn horizontally across. Continue knitting. Pay attention after each stitch when switching colors. Gently stretch the fabric. Ensure that this yarn is not pulled too tight. Otherwise, the fabric will shrink. It will lose its elasticity. Let me explain the case where the horizontal yarn carry is more than 3 stitches. If the stitch count is more than 3, after every 3 or so stitches, weave the yarn you need to carry. This means ensuring that after knitting, the yarn you need to carry is fixed. You can see, I woven it twice here. If you finish knitting with color 1 here, and the next stitch needs to be knit with the main color, simply carry this yarn over to knit. This is the method for changing colors in a horizontally line on the wrong side. We'll undo to the position with 2 stitches left. Continue knitting with the main color. The stitches I demonstrate are all few. The focus is on explaining the method. I won't repeat the explanation after this. This color 1 yarn stays here. Later, change colors in a vertical line. After knitting the middle stitches, add another small bobbin of color 1. Then knit 2 stitches with color 1. After completing these, carry the main color yarn over. Knit the rest of the row. This yarn stays here. This row is now complete. I have finished starting position. This yarn is paused. Next, continue knitting with this yarn. Note, you need to weave these 2 yarns. In this case, we can place the paused yarn above. The yarn to be knitted goes below. Then knit the corresponding stitches. After we knit 1 stitch, look at the wrong side. The paused yarn gets woven. This makes the 2 colors after knitting. Connect tightly. It doesn't become loose, and it doesn't affect the appearance. Knit another stitch. Then continue. Carry this yarn over and knit directly. Note, when changing colors in a vertical line, after the first stitch of the new color is knitted, gently stretch the fabric. Ensure that this carry yarn is not too tight. If the number of stitches here is more, usually more than 3 stitches, you need to weave the yarn in between. It's the same on the wrong side. Weave the yarn every 3 stitches or so. If you need to switch to the main color yarn, just knit with the main color yarn. This is the method for changing colors in a horizontally line on the right side. Let's undo. Knit the middle part with this yarn. Then switch to this color and knit 2 stitches. Finish this row. I'll emphasize this again, for both the right and wrong sides. When changing colors in a vertical line, weave the yarn before knitting. This means ensuring that after you knit one stitch with the new color, the paused yarn is fixed. Refer to the above video and the chart to knit the right front piece. After finishing all the corresponding squares with the contrasting color yarn, leave a small tail and cut the yarn. Then weave in the ends following the texture on the wrong side. Ensure it doesn't affect the appearance of the right side. After finishing the last row, transfer the hold stitches from the back piece's right shoulder to a needle. Then join and bind off with the right front piece's shoulder. Please see the demonstration of this joining method. That concludes the instructions for the right front piece. The first method is connecting needle to needle. This is a commonly used joining method for only loops. This involves joining and binding off to connect the pieces. It is commonly used to connect the shoulders of the front and back pieces. Both pieces should be in a loop state. We will consider the braid texture as the right side. Joining and binding off is usually done on the wrong side of the piece. Place the two pieces with their right sides face each other. Typically, one of the pieces will not have the yarn cut. No matter which piece the yarn is on, place the side with the yarn on the right side. When joining and binding off, you typically bind off while knitting both sides together. This means insert into one loop of both pieces. Knit 2 loops together and bind off. The number of stitches on both pieces is usually the same. Simply knit and bind off stitch by stitch. If one piece has more stitches, you need to decrease on the side with more stitches while binding off. Assuming this piece has more stitches, you can insert through 2 loops of this piece at once. Continue by inserting through 1 loop of other piece. Knit together and bind off. If the back piece has more stitches, insert through 2 loops at the back. Knit together and bind off. Here, both pieces have the same stitches. Continue binding them off. Tie off the yarn tail and hide it. This is the effect after joining and binding off. Next, sew together the edge of section 1 on the right front piece with the right side of section 1 on the back piece. This is row-to-row sewing. Please watch the demonstration of row-to-row sewing. Next, let's learn how to do the sewing. We usually use the seamless sewing method. When sewing, pick up the horizontal strands between 2 stitches along the edges. Let's first get to know the fabric piece. First, find the first stitch at the edge. The first stitch at the edge typically has 4 situations. The first situation is a slip stitch. This means picking down without knitting, following the texture. This forms a large braid. The second situation is also a slip stitch. But when slipping, it's in the opposite direction of the texture below. This forms a knot like this. The third situation is knitting every row. Usually, knit on the right side, purl on the wrong side. This forms small braids. The fourth situation is also knitting every row. Usually, knit both on the right side and the wrong side. This forms garter stitch. The second stitch is on the left of the first stitch. For example, with this fabric piece, looking at this side, the second stitch shows a knit texture. Looking from the other side, the second stitch shows a purl texture. Regardless of whether the second stitch shows a knit texture or a purl texture, you can notice that the loops are all oriented the same way. These inverted loops have horizontal lines below them, which are the horizontal strands between 2 stitches. On this side as well. These are the inverted loops. And this strand is the horizontal strand between 2 stitches. The edge with garter stitch is the same. This is the second stitch. This column is the second stitch, with the loops oriented forward. Between these 2 stitches, there are inverted loops, and this line is the horizontal strand between two stitches. The edge is a slip stitch. Similarly, between these two stitches, there are also horizontal strands. No matter which type, one strand roughly corresponds to one row. Before sewing, you can weave in the ends for a few stitches on the wrong side, and tie a knot to secure them. I won't weave in them here. For seamless sewing, you alternate between these two fabric pieces each time, picking up the horizontal strands between two stitches along the edges. To sew, picking up 1-2 strands each time. Note, if the row counts match for both fabric pieces, you can sew them together correspondingly. This means picking up the same number of strands each time. Always insert the needle where you last pulled out. To pick up the horizontal strands. Here, I will pick up one strand each time. After sewing a few stitches, slightly tighten. If the row counts differ for the two fabric pieces, but you need to sew them together evenly, you can pick up more strands on the side with more rows. For example, generally, pick up one strand each time. On the side with more rows, you can pick up 2 strands at appropriate positions. Here, the row counts of the two fabric pieces are the same. I will continue sewing. This is the method for seamless sewing of rows.